By every appearance, he was successful. He was an internationally known photographer. He had it made, and he was looking for something. He knew he needed to have a fresher eye, a fresher look at the world.
This was a man who had a mission, and he stuck by it.
Well, I really identify with his quest for renewal.
He wanted to force himself to only shoot one photograph a day, one situation and one frame. The challenge is inconceivable.
I probably spent 2 hours in here, wandering. Then I set my tripod up, and I think I spent at least another half hour to 45 minutes. And my heart was pounding as though a grizzly bear was stalking me. That's the sense of incredible exhilaration of what's going to come and all the mystery that could happen.
On a Friday, September 23rd, 1994, world-renowned nature photographer Jim Brandenburg set out on a journey. It was a photographic journey, one defined less by distance traveled than by falling leaves and migrating birds, by the fleeting sunlight of a wild northern landscape slipping day by day closer to winter. Brandenburg intended to capture the elusive spirit of the land and the changing season, while challenging himself by taking only one photograph a day, a single click of the shutter, for each of the 90 days from the autumnal equinox to the winter solstice. It was an inward journey as well, driven by a desperate need for personal and creative renewal. And it was a journey deeply grounded in a particular place, the Minnesota-Ontario border country and its Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. At this wild edge of civilization, Brandenburg has made his home and studio, a place called Ravenwood. He lives here with his wife and business partner, Judy. Their daughter, Heidi, is also on hand most days, if she's not minding the Brandenburg Gallery 20 miles down the road in the town of Ely. Anthony, Jim and Judy's son, provides graphic design services and maintains the Ravenwood website. Today, Ravenwood is both a personal refuge and a picture farm for Brandenburg, where the subjects of his work are always close at hand.
The most evocative sounds in nature are here. We've got the loon and the timber wolf, and they occupy the same territory at different times of the year. The loon will be courting, making this incredible sound that is almost unequaled. 6 months later, the wolves will be on that same lake on the ice, howling, after making a kill of a deer or a moose. I think there's something really magical about that.
Living beside the creek and the waterfall behind us here, especially in the springtime, there's such an excitement in the air of seeing that first water coming through and seeing the animals coming in. The wolves had killed a deer down below here. We got permission from the game warden that we could bring them up here, the deer. So we set it out here by the waterfall. But it seemed like almost a week that we had animals every day coming in, especially eagles and young eagles, and we had about 13 of them at one point.
Brandenburg discovered the Northwoods with its abundant wildlife during childhood summer vacations to a lakeshore cabin in northern Minnesota. It became one of two settings that nurtured in him a deep love of photography. The open horizons of southwestern Minnesota's prairie, where he grew up on his family's farm, was the other landscape that moved Brandenburg early in life to swap a hunting rifle for a camera.
And this is the tall grass prairie. This is literally where I grew up, the playground of my youth. Whether one grows up in the inner city or here, like I did on the prairie, I think you have a memory and a strong connection to that very place. The tallgrass prairie, I believe, figured very heavily in my development as a photographer because to me it was so magical. In fact, not very far from here, just maybe 100 yards over here, when I was 14 or 15 or so, I called in a red fox, which was probably my favorite animal. Hid behind a rock like this one, and I looked over and the fox was sneaking up on me, thinking it was a mouse to eat. I'm not sure who was the most startled when we saw each other. But that is a very special memory. And it, again, to capture an animal with a camera is something that I've never grown tired of.
After completing college and a brief stint as a photographer with the nearby Worthington Globe newspaper, Brandenburg's career made an extraordinary leap. A freelance assignment focusing on the tallgrass prairie for the National Geographic magazine was soon followed by an offer to become a contract photographer with the Geographic, an almost unheard of accomplishment for someone with Brandenburg's limited professional experience.
I would say that Jim distinguishes himself by the sort of harmony that he's able to convey in his photographs. He can communicate a feeling. When you look at his photographs, you actually react. And I think he's a master at that.
And I think the reason for that is his passion. It is so deep. I think the subjects that he takes, I think he feels for the subject with such depth.
Jim is as focused as anybody I've ever seen. He's able to wake up before the sun rises, go to bed after the sun sets, and work the entire time. He's able to sit in one spot for days and days and days. Somehow he has this knowledge of this shot is going to happen, and he's going to wait for it, and he's going to know how it's going to happen. I've seen it many times.
In 1980, Brandenburg began a period of extensive travel with the National Geographic, shooting stories that took him from Africa to Asia to the Arctic. He also took on freelance assignments for other prominent publications and expanded his creative reach, writing and doing photography for his own books and cinematography for natural history films that have been broadcast on major television networks in the United States. A National Geographic assignment to Ellesmere Island in Canada's high Arctic gave Brandenburg an opportunity to photograph a pack of Arctic wolves at close quarters. The extraordinary pictures crowned his reputation as the world's preeminent photographer of one of nature's most elusive animals, and helped him accumulate a long list of prestigious honors and awards. Northern Minnesota's large wolf population also captured Brandenburg's imagination. But more than a century of conflict between humans and wolves made the animals extremely wary, and Brandenburg realized he needed to live within their midst if he was to photograph them. In 1982, he began building Ravenwood, where he spent as much time as he could between his lengthy and demanding international assignments.
Working for the National Geographic, the pressure is really on, and we have a lot of people nipping at our heels. Younger photographers wanting to get your job, editors that have seen everything, literally everything in the world, and it takes an awful lot to impress them. So the day's never done. I mean, you start early and you don't stop shooting until you're either exhausted or you're absolutely sure you got the photograph. And I'd been through that cycle for 20 years, and I was getting weary.
It's extremely demanding. It's very difficult on family life. You're away, usually more than half the year, if not more, in in situations that they're not necessarily rolling out the red carpet for you.
He was probably gone most of the time, maybe 70% of the time. He missed a lot of the special occasions that I know he probably feels bad about. And at one point, I remember as an adult, Jim made the comment that now that he wasn't working for National Geographic, he wanted to be able to spend more time with his family, but his children were grown, so we weren't around the house as much as he probably would have liked.
Eventually, the exhausting travel, the pressures of magazine publication, and the extended time away from Brandenburg's family and forest home took its toll.
I lost passion. I felt a little bit unfulfilled and empty. More than a little bit. I was empty. And I don't know why. Except I don't think I was paying homage to the thing that I started. A very quiet, contemplative, personal relationship with nature.
Brandenburg's intuition told him he needed to do something bold to reconnect him with nature and reawaken his passion for photography. A special project, a personal project, took shape in his mind.
For 90 days, starting on the first day of fall, ending on the first day of winter, my self-assignment was to make one picture, one click of the shutter a day. And for some reason, which is inexplicable, my intuition told me that this was the project, this 90-day Chase by the Light project, was either going to wring it out of me or force me to move on to do something different.
He gave himself this task, and it was as though I had given him that task. And he took it seriously.
Being, as a norm, asked by a photo editor to go out and shoot hundreds or thousands of images for one assignment. It's a little, if I can do another music analogy, like somebody going into a studio and doing 5 or 6 cuts of the same song and then mixing them and splicing it, all the good pieces together, and you take all of the glitches. This was his chance to prove himself that he can go out and, again, do a live performance.
I always tell people that this is the major leagues. So it's like this particular player is going to hit a grand slam every time he goes up to bat. That's pretty amazing. That's a heck of a challenge. And you only have one ball that they're going to pitch you. One ball, grand slam.
I was addicted to shooting pictures at the National Geographic. We would routinely go off and shoot 10, 20, 30 rolls of film a day. Those are thousands of pictures a day. And then going back to the light table and being able to pick out the very best nuance of slightly different exposure, slightly different composition. And I think in the strictest sense of the Zen approach, less is more. I think you can focus with a very sharp, keen instrument, cut through all the extraneous material and go right to the essence when you're forced to make one picture. When the idea for this project passed through me, this was the place I thought about. The spirit of this place captures my imagination and creates a mystery like I don't feel many other places. This place typifies the North, the mysterious, almost untouchable North, full of mosquitoes, boggy, not particularly beautiful. It has a haunting quality to it to me. I like it in here, and I feel humbled. I think that's what it is. It's a feeling of being humbled by a place that it's much older than you, much bigger than you, and there's so much mystery. Don't even try to figure it out. Of all the beautiful places, the Boundary Waters Islands and the lakes and the eagle's nests that I could have visited on that first day, I picked this blank spot on the map off the beaten path. This was the place that I wanted to start the project with. Put me in the mood. Physically, the bush camp is less than a half-hour walk from the main house, but psychologically it seems like it's miles and miles away. It really was my base camp for the 90-day project. It sits up on a cliff overlooking Judd Lake, and it's right next to the boundary waters. The bush camp is really the spiritual heart of my existence. I was starting to realize just how complex this project was going to become. And again, I was at my front yard of my bush camp, looking out across the lake. It had just rained. A little squall came through, and a rainbow came out. And there was a raven feather also lying on the rock in this vicinity, much like this one. And I was faced with the decision of photographing the raven feather, which I love ravens and I love feathers. A little moment in nature where the feather had come out of the raven and landed here in this 3 billion-year-old rock. Or do I photograph this grand rainbow? And I thought to myself, well, what kind of a project is this? Do I do the big, grand calendar picture, the commercial shot of the rainbow? Or do I do something a little bit deeper, a little more intimate, a little more quiet? Decided to photograph the raven feather, and I'm very happy for it because it's probably something that speaks to a little defiance that this project was about. I was defying the predictable and the commercial and the expected. In the long run, I think it tells a more emotional story of nature. Day number 8 found me back in the spruce bog. Not looking for anything particular. I was resting probably not 15 feet away from here, and a rough grouse flew in and landed on one of these little mounds of moss. And in about 15 seconds, I grabbed the camera before the grouse really realized. Maybe the grouse had never seen anyone here before either, so it probably is a place truly that no one ever comes to. The grouse kind of looked up quick, and I made the picture, and I was actually quite pleased. Nature, as you become more and more familiar with it, it isn't the big events that one gets drawn towards, it's the little moments. It's the discovery of like right here we have an orchid ready to bloom here in about a week. Those little discoveries are so delightful, it's so quiet. These things have been happening for thousands and thousands of years, since the glaciers were here. To me, that is miraculous. Day 10 was probably the most interesting story, and I think maybe the most interesting photograph of the whole 90 days, in that I discovered a pair of loons. One of them had a fish hook embedded in its neck and 10 feet of fish line wrapped around it so it couldn't dive and it couldn't fly, and it was doomed to certain death. I was lucky enough to be able to catch it, unwrap the tangled fishing line, released it. The loon swam off into the beautiful sunrise with fog, perfect composition, flapped its wings as though to say, thank you. It's like being rewarded for a kind act. Saving the loon's life, the gift was my favorite image. Since that day, we've had a tremendous storm that came through and leveled nearly 500,000 acres here in the boundary waters. And of those 500,000 acres, I think the most poignant scene for me is this little tiny island that's probably 50 feet by 30 feet wide. I photographed this island for the last 30 years. We have to look at it in our short lifetime. It won't heal as we want to see it with beautiful big pine trees, but it'll be a different landscape, and there'll be new growth, and we're going to learn a lot.
Well, when you come into a place like this, you might feel a sense of timelessness. And how do you capture a sense of time with a still photograph? And the photograph of the spruce log and the mushrooms consuming that spruce log is probably, to me, a statement about time. It's very green and very soft. It will, like, eat anything that falls and smother it and consume it. As a comparison to life itself, I suppose. We all go back into the earth. Everything goes back into the earth, and it just keeps getting recycled. A lot of people ask why I chose autumn to do this 90 days. There's something about autumn that brings up from your deepest senses a time for preparation to get ready for winter. We've got the fall colors, which are spectacular here. And it's probably that time of the year where you see the biggest change, where it goes from brown-green through all the full colors to bare trees and then white snow. There isn't nearly enough hours in the day to get the pictures that I need to show what I want to show of the seasonal change. It's like a strange kind of deadline that comes up every year. Oftentimes the light is what makes the picture. It was a heavy overcast day, and we came to this spot and the light came through the trees. It was as the sun was just on the horizon, literally the last 5 minutes of the day to shoot. And my wife Judy was with me, and I was pretty low. I was walking back to the lake, and she said, well, look off this direction. The sun is hitting the hill. And I turned, and there was the photograph. So I have to give her half the credit on this one. I set up my tripod here with a normal lens, contemplated the scene a little while, and clicked the shutter, and I was fairly happy with it when I shot it, and even more happy when I saw the film. In an otherwise very ordinary scene. I've passed this scene maybe 1,000 times. I never made a picture in this area, but I was forced to that particular day because it was literally the last ray of hope, last ray of light of the day. Sometimes the intensity of that moment where you have to do something, you draw up all the resources of your whole career, and it's focused in that one little brief moment. Day 23 was spent searching the woods for photographs, and I'd seen a couple things that were interesting. I believe I'd seen some otters that day, and I chose to pass it up, and I'd come to the point where the sun was setting, had set, and this is a point where I thought about maybe quitting this project. It was early enough. I only had 20-some days invested in it, and I wasn't real happy. I wasn't getting the images. I could feel it that I was expecting to get. And then that intuition that I speak so much about, that's so important to me in my career, kind of came back and whispered to me, don't give up. Well, I had precious minutes left to shoot. The light was blue. I needed a tripod at this point. Saw the leaf floating in this sweet little beaver pond, quickly made a decision to shoot it, and felt I'd totally failed for the day. When I got my film back, it was one of the biggest surprises of the 90 days. But when I saw that film, it brought me back to life, thinking that maybe there is hope. Maybe some of the images that don't appear to be so good at the time, I've invested my career into this moment, and maybe something bigger will come back later. come across a bear skull like this in the forest, you wonder what the story was behind it. When I found the deer skull in the cedar bog, I thought, well, probably a pack of wolves killed the deer. It was a doe, looked like a young doe, and the bones were left to melt into the bog. And here's a case where a bear might have died of old age. It looks like it was a fairly old bear by the wear of the teeth. It's a fairly large bear, but you really would like to know what happened. Kind of a lovely sculpture, in a sense. It's sitting on its top. This is the top of the skull that's towards the ground here, of course, and the bottom jaw is missing. This is, to me, is a real treasure. It's almost like a little shrine. I come back here, found this last year, and it survived the winter, as it's probably survived 10 or 15 winters. And it's very thrilling. It's like I found a nugget of gold.
There were days where I would start before the sun came up, when it was literally pitch dark, and head out and come back without anything, scared, thinking this is the day there'll be a blank page in my project. And I'd say, no, you have to give it the very last try. We have a waterfall in front of the house. I came back this particular day having spent the whole day, probably walked miles and miles and miles. And I sat up above the waterfall and had my wife shine a flashlight on the back side of it for highlights, just to give it an extra little bit. This is well after the sunset. Most people think that's the sun setting, but there's the real professional photographer making a picture, not taking a picture. I don't think I've ever told that story before, that that's actually artificial light there. Is that important? Maybe there's a lesson there. Sometimes you just have to make things work. Does it take away from the image to know that that's artificial light, or does it add to it knowing that I made it work? I don't know. That's for someone else to decide.
Day 38, 2 in the morning, just barely day 38. Brought the Northern Lights in their full regalia. I could see them through the skylight. Woke us up. I jumped in the car and drove over to Moose Lake here, which is just about 5-10 minutes away. And 2 hours later, I made a 40-second exposure after much deliberation and calculation because of just one exposure. Normally I'd shoot a roll or two of film with such spectacular Northern Lights. The Northern Lights are a phenomenon that is almost without equal. If you've never seen the Northern Lights, it's something that is almost unbelievable. It's fun to be with people the first time they see them. They're awestruck. It's like seeing another universe. I've spent, since my teenage years, waiting for the moment I'm going to be confronted by an amazing picture of an animal. That's just my nature. I think sometimes it's another hint of genetic stuff inside of me. I'm the hunter with my bow and arrow or my spear. Thousands, if not millions of years of our existence is dependent upon our ability to make quick decisions and capture something to live by. I think about that a lot. And it's very exciting to me that I have a bridge to the past. When you're trying to sneak up to an animal, is that you don't try to focus on the animal so much, but act more casual, like you're a deer grazing, and not focus on it so much. And then they seem to sense that they're not being stalked. I can hear a female off to the left, chuckling, partly because this is the 6 months away from the mating season. See how foolish a male can be when a female is present. I'm going to push it just a little bit here and see what happens. I was within 4 feet. Yeah, no, he's very suspicious. I don't blame you, old boy. You really put on a performance there. When you find yourself amidst trees that are over 300 years old, there's a wonderful sensation of awe and comfort. This is one of those places that I knew I would come to. I knew I would come to this place. I knew I'd make a picture of this log. It's kind of an elusive, mysterious place to me, and I didn't want to make a sharp photograph of just the log or a wide-angle shot of the forest. So I set the camera up right over here on a tripod and took a meter reading, and it was a very long exposure. It was a 15-second exposure, and halfway through the exposure, at 7 seconds, I decided, again, that intuitive, instinctive thing that photographers sometimes do. I picked up the whole system and walked forward to about this spot, which would give the photograph a sense of here and not here. It has almost a mythical, blurry feel to it. Some of it's sharp and some of it's soft. The old saying, "the no rewards without risks," really came forth in this particular shot, in this exposure. The risk taker came out that I only could shoot one exposure on an assignment when I can shoot as many as 50 rolls of film if I wanted to, shooting this one picture. But I'm not sure it would have been any better. That's the mystery of this project, of never having to been able to shoot more exposures to compare. And that's one of the lessons I've learned. That's not necessary to rethink it, to go back, but to make a decision and live with it and be happy with it. The evening of day 56, it was probably about 10 o'clock at night, I heard a shot off in the distance. And I thought, that sounds like a poacher to me. Who would be out shooting in the dark? And it was during deer season. So I went out the next morning and saw that the ravens and eagles were circling about in the spot that I heard the shot come from, not far from here. And a short ways in the woods off of the road, I saw the deer lying there. And the shooter, the poacher, had taken just a little bit of the back strap off, just a small portion of meat. And I thought, well, this is an interesting situation. It'd be hard to pass it up. So as I moved into the deer, looking at various parts of it, I saw the eye as still having a little bit of life left in it, in a sense. It's still a little bit glossy, but not quite. So I got closer and closer and closer to the eye, and I thought, ah, this is the shot of the day. It's poignant. It really shows the innocence of a deer. When a wolf kills a deer, I can have tinges of uncomfortableness, I suppose, that the deer was a victim. When a poacher kills a deer and leaves it lie is inexcusable and kind of blasphemous. And I thought, I really want to show the innocence of a deer. And the best way to do it with these beautiful big doe eyes is to get in close. And I thought that that kind of riveting, half alive, half dead look to the eye brought home the fact that it was senseless in a way.
Every time I sight that bush camp, I get a real thrill, every time. I could pick up in the rhythm of the woods.
The animals have become more accustomed to me. The moose swim across the lake occasionally, and the beaver all know me. The wolves have been accustomed to me out here over a period of over 20 years. The eagles, pine martens, the deer, the bear. I've had several interesting bear encounters right in this spot. This place, over the years, makes me very happy. It's my therapy. I've been pursuing wolves for 30 years. Subject-driven obsession. I want to do something that was driven by something a little more elusive, an idea or a process or a spiritual direction of some kind. So we're getting close to the end of the project, and I hadn't even thought about the wolf thing. I knew the wolves were around, and I was always interested in seeing wolves, but not pursuing them professionally. I think they needed a vacation too. So towards the end of the project, the day after Thanksgiving, November 25th, that year, I came out here and I looked out on the brand new ice that was only 1 day old, and I saw a wolf walking across the ice, testing the ice, and I thought, wow, there's a wolf picture I wouldn't believe, and it was way down the end of the lake, and I got my 600mm out, had plenty of time, and composed it and shot it, and I thought, wow, I've got a wolf picture for this project. How neat. Well, that's interesting. The wolves are coming to me, maybe. The next day, there was another wolf. And I think I had 4 or 5 wolf encounters at the very end of the project, some at fairly close range. And now I really think that the wolves are saying, we're not done with you yet, Brandenburg. December 1st brings us to a spot that was very memorable in that it's one of the few times I've ever embarrassed a wolf. It was right at this spot. I was just getting started in the morning. The light was still not even up over the trees here, I believe. The sun wasn't, in fact. And I came up this little trail and I heard something coming down the trail. I thought it was a deer in the snow. It made that sound of an animal coming towards you. And I crouched down and got ready. Had a fairly long lens on that particular day, thinking, well, I'll just get a portrait of a deer. Unbelievably, it was a wolf, which is, of all the years I've been up here, it's rare that I'm crouched and ready and see a wolf or hear a wolf before it sees me. And it came, and I had camouflage clothing on. I was all ready, I didn't make a move, and I was very low, and the wolf saw me, which they're incredibly perceptive. And at that moment, I snapped the picture. Subsequent to that, looking at the photograph, it's the description of embarrassment on an animal. Wolves are like dogs. They have lots of expressions with their ears and with their eyes and body language. And that wolf what I know about wolves was screaming out, "Wow, you really caught me on this one." When I start out in the morning, before I even leave the house, I get all ready as though I can, in an instant, be up and shoot a picture within a few seconds. Now, I would say that days, months, sometimes years go by before I utilize that, but when it happens, it's really important. I can't tell you how many things I've missed over the years where I wasn't quite ready, or it took an extra 2-3 seconds of fiddling or fixing something and I didn't quite get the picture. Then you need a reward once in a while, though, and this is one of those days I was rewarded. And it doesn't happen very often, but the day that I encountered this particular embarrassed wolf was one of those really special days that I'll never forget. This is a photograph that I knew I would make. This is one that I'd been looking at for years and never made this in the winter. It's the kind of picture I like to shoot where it's simple in one sense, but very complex in another. And I probably spent an hour looking through the viewfinder, trying to get just the right composition. It evoked a certain Japanese aesthetic, which means an awful lot to me. There's something about the way those trees and the shadows line up on that snow. The raven are always with the wolves. You never see a wolf pack without ravens. There's that wonderful symbiotic relationship. They both benefit from each other being in their presence. The wolf finds the food for the raven, a deer or a moose or a caribou to the north, and the raven has food. There's an advantage to the wolf. The raven's up like an aerial reconnaissance, constantly surveying the scene, and they have over 250 vocalizations, more than almost any other animal. So if I have any advantage or any secret, is I've learned that the raven is the key to getting an image of the wolf. Plus, I love to watch the interaction. The Native Americans always described the wolf and the raven as some of their most respected animals. They were always at the top of the totem pole. Oftentimes the raven was on top, the wolf was right below it. For good reason. The Native Americans watched nature very closely and understood who the smartest animals were and the ones that they learned the most from. The raven and the wolf have this love-hate relationship. The ravens benefit from the wolf, and the wolf benefits from the raven's keen eyesight. And the raven provides the wolf protection, and maybe even fun. There's a lot of playtime between the two, teasing. Here's the bear tree. Every year, it seems, the bears come through this little cedar valley and choose to make their mark on this tree. You can see there's some fairly fresh ones that have just happened here in the last few weeks, actually. But I've been looking at this tree for almost 30 years, and every year it happens. Why this tree and why this place? It's a crossroads of several different trails. I think that could be part of it. Is it a bear that's trying to tell the other bears that it's dominant? And I'm the biggest bear around because I can reach this high? Or is it just a plaything, like cats would use to scratch a pole? Another one of those mysteries in life. It took many years to get my first pictures of wolves, and I learned that I had to move up here and live in the forest to really get them. And that you had to be available, be patient, watch the ravens. And I still have yet, after 30-some years of shooting, to get my first photographs of wild wolves killing a wild deer. Day 86, I came about as close to seeing a wolf killing a deer as I've ever seen. I knew something had happened, very dramatic, because the eagles and the ravens were circling and making this sound that only could be one thing. There's just been a fresh deer kill by a wolf. It was fairly close by, so I thought, let me just run over there and take a look at it. And sure enough, I came upon the scene of a deer carcass and thought, how do I photograph a deer carcass in an aesthetic way? It was rather graphic, still pretty fresh, and the wolves have eaten some of it. So I looked upon the balsam fir here and I thought, well, this is really just recycled life in other forms, that all of us creatures eventually go back to the ground in one way or the other. So I focused on the bough of the balsam with the out of focus carcass in the background and made the shot for the day. Well, December 21st found us here, the last day of the project, 90 days of looking for a picture every day. 1:40 a.m., I was lucky to have a full moon. Like any story, you need a good ending. And I really wanted this to be a good ending, and I probably couldn't have found a better place with better light, 50-second exposure, putting the camera in a tripod and lining it up and letting the seconds roll off. Every time the second rolled off, my heart was pounding greater and greater, and when that last shutter went down and my 90-day project was done, was an incredible relief of, like anyone that's been on a long journey of some kind, there's kind of exhilaration and sadness at the same time. Several of the days on this project were about taking a chance with the possibility that it wouldn't work, but I would only know that after the film came back. I'd have to say these night pictures, like this one in particular, this moonlit picture, conceivably could have been a failure. And there was something exhilarating about that, not to take the easy way out, but to push it right to the limit. And to have that be the very last day, perhaps technically the most difficult picture of all, was exhilarating for me. With a heartbeat pounding of having the project finished, with a technical difficulty trying to solve that was kind of a double. But I can certainly say I slept well when I went back to bed that night, knowing the project was done, and there's nothing more I could do about it. It was the perfect conclusion. This was the most difficult project I've ever done by far in my life. And no one was watching. No one had any expectations except me. And initially, it was really just for me, and I didn't really care if anyone was interested in it. It sat in a drawer just over here for 2 years before the National Geographic came to talk me into doing something else.
And I saw these photographs, and I thought the photographs were magnificent to begin with. Just the content I thought was magnificent. And I said, well, what's a hook? I mean, you got to have a reason to publish these things. We're not a calendar magazine. We're not a, what is it that's different? And he said, well, what's different is that it's only one frame a day. And I said, oh, you mean you've edited this and it's one picture that you pulled out of the hundreds and maybe thousands of rolls, because, you know, we are used to photographers at this magazine shooting a lot of film. And he said, no. I shot one frame a day for X amount of days. And that became really fascinating to me. I said, we have to publish this. This is magnificent.
The cover story of the November 1997 issue was called Northwood's Journal. Its 90 photographs were more images than National Geographic has ever run in a feature story. It is also the story that required the least amount of film in the magazine's history. Chased by the Light, the book based on the project, quickly became the best-selling book of Brandenburg's career. Ripples from the impact of the 90-day project began spreading in many directions.
People that would write and say it changed their life. People would show it to their children, and they would send us thank you letters saying, I know our child is going to do something in the environment because of that story. It moved them so much. And that's, to us, that's what it's all about. When you think that you have changed someone's view about the environment, about saving this beautiful land and the animals, that's what it's all about.
We were talking about the threats to the BWC at the time. He got all excited. He immediately printed a number of shots from the series for me, multiple copies, thrust them in my hands and said, take them to Washington, which I did. So I took them up to the Hill in Washington and was able with those photos to show people images of the canoe country, and they didn't realize that there was something so special in the Midwest. So he was able, through his photography and his generosity in sharing that with me, to show people who were in a position of influence why it was important not to let bad legislation pass.
You know, I'm always telling people, particularly kids, you know, adventure can be just in your own backyard. It is about approach. It is about passion and finding the things that ignite us. They don't all have to be so far away. And he totally achieved it. I mean, that book is nothing but a total celebration of what's out his door.
The commitment to protect the landscapes that had nurtured and renewed Brandenburg's creative spirit moved Jim and Judy to participate in wilderness preservation. With help from the nonprofit Trust for Public Land, the Brandenburgs set aside 640 acres of Ravenwood Forest to be preserved in perpetuity. Also, the proceeds from a new gallery in Laverne, Minnesota, the town of Brandenburg's birth, have been dedicated to restoring and preserving remnants of the area's now rare tallgrass prairie. The 360-acre Touch the Sky Prairie, the first parcel to be protected in the project, is being managed as a wildlife refuge by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Of the 40 million readers that see the National Geographic, we'd get some feedback once in a while, but you're never quite sure. You're always trying to affect the world or change the world. I did 2 prairie stories for the Geographic, and I'm not quite sure where that ever went. But with our Touch the Sky project, where we're preserving the prairie of my homeland back in Rock County, Minnesota, that is absolute concrete reward. You can go out there and thump the ground and say, look what these pictures did. There's a direct relationship for my nature photography to be able to preserve that prairie forever and ever and ever. And I never thought the ground that I grew up on, that I worshipped, that would ever be able to be saved because of my pictures.
Doing this project at home, literally, where I could virtually walk to every picture, really revitalized me. It didn't bring me back to the world that I was tired of. It put me deeper into that world that is more mysterious and more elusive and more spiritual. This is my story. I find that developing a grounded sense of context of where you live, knowing your subject, better than a far-off exotic place, over a period of years and years and years, and telling that story, I find a much richer experience. My plan is to continue this project in one way or the other until I don't shoot anymore. It's important to me to capture this country before I go, and I know I'll never be able to do it. The more I'm here, the more I photograph, the more I see it's endless.